Hey, good afternoon, everybody. The other day, the Notre Dame quarterback was asked what the season meant to them since they had lost to Ohio State in the championship game, and he said, "Well, it still meant everything to the team because they created, and I quote, a brotherhood capable of more than even they thought possible." And somebody said, "Well, how'd you do that?" I said, "Well, because we put the team ahead of ourselves." And that really struck me. And I've been in sobriety in the AA movement for a bit now, and they talk about a common calamity that unites us and really helps us support each other in a very deep way. But not every team does what Notre Dame does, and not every team does what folks in AA do. We don't all unite around each other at work. A lot of teams break and they get more selfish and more insular. And I'm just going to stay in my lane and ignore everything else. And so I started thinking, well, why is that? And it really got back to what my work really is all about now, which is using vulnerability, the pain, the anxiety, the fear that comes with that common calamity, and use that to bring people together around vulnerability. Brene Brown's research proves that great leaders, great teams, they all get really vulnerable. The leader leads with vulnerability, the team gets vulnerable with each other, and then that is what causes them to unite, to commit to others instead of themselves, put the team ahead of self. And that really, and this has been evolving over the last few years with me, but it crystallized this idea of connection before content, that it's not about the ideas. Folks will get great ideas. It's about how we are together. And so I've always focused on connection, but now my retreats really focus on vulnerability and how do you bring teams together around whatever their common calamity is. So uh, rough times are really great. Let's use that. Um, and I had an experience recently that, or a team I'm on, not facilitating, but sometimes I kind of facilitate meetings, but it's a team I'm on, and things weren't going right in a meeting, and folks weren't getting it, and I just knew people were missing something. Turns out the person I was getting frustrated with was missing something, and I was quote unquote right. What's the point of being right though if you're an asshole? So I got on my high horse. Folks said, "Hold on a second. The room's getting kind of tense." Of course, the room was tense because I was being a jerk. I was getting pushy. And I said, "Yeah," I got very vulnerable. I said, "Yep, I really care about these people." And I said, "Yeah, you're right. This is what I do. I get worried that we're not going to achieve this great outcome. And so I start pushing and arguing. I slip back into being a lawyer, and it hurts others, but it hurts me worse. It's hurt my career. It's hurt my marriage. It hurts relationship with family." I said, "I'm really committed to doing better than this. And so just call me out." And was, really, and I was in pain because I effed it up again, and it was just felt ashamed. Well, another woman in the group came out and said, "Well, I was thinking the same thing Jeff was thinking, but I withdrew into my shell. He goes into lawyer mode. I go into hiding mode. And I want to fess up that I had the same thoughts and I didn't speak up." And so, um, anyway, she was trying to be soft on me and saying I was offering value underneath my, bad delivery, which was very kind of her. But then other people started to fess up, not fess up, but just share how they felt and what was inside of them when things aren't going well. And all the elephants came out of the room, into the room. All the elephants came into the room. All the things that nobody wanted to point out or nobody wanted to say, it all started getting said a little chaotically, but people were very vulnerable. I said, "Wow, we need more of this." So we called a little special meeting. And at the special meeting, things really got deep. We asked a great question. What gifts do you hold in exile? So people started sharing these gifts that were sort of touchy-feely, spiritual. And anyway, point was we all rallied around getting vulnerable about our gifts. Here's what I really wish I could offer this group. And that was it during this sort of hour, just not a retreat, but just we're setting aside no content, just let's get vulnerable, let's get deep together. And so I just think folks need special time to be able to slow down, get mindful, notice what's happening in the group energy, notice what's happening in themselves relative to the group's energy, and really get intentionally vulnerable. And I'm going to go into more depth about the special process that I use to help people do that. I'll get into more depth in another video, but just real quickly, my vulnerability inducing special retreat process, and I'm very serious about this, though I'm sort of being light about it, is first thing we do some mindfulness, we do some meditation. How do you be mindful? How do you notice your thoughts, notice your feelings, and get in a really still place so that you can share those thoughts and feelings? And then I ask people to tell stories that evoke tears of fear. And I am old enough to know that that's sort of a double meaning thing. Tears of fear and also tears of sustaining joy. Tears of debilitating fear and tears of sustaining joy. Tell stories about from a work experience that get to that. And then what gifts do you hold in exile from your team? What's your professional identity, and to what extent is it aligned with the role you're playing on this team? And then we talk about, what do you want to survive, not survive, what do you want to thrive at your work rather than the needs that what you need just to survive at work. So we want people sharing their wants rather than expecting other people to give them these things that they really need to thrive. I asked folks to talk about narrative. What's your inner narrative that's holding you back from participating fully with this team? What are you telling yourself that makes you judge them or hold yourself back? And how do you create a collective narrative that really fires everybody up? What's the story, the heroic journey of this team? Like the Notre Dame team, they lost their first game of the season, and second game of the season. Anyway, to a terrible team, big upset, everything's over, young coach, it's going to fall apart. But they rallied around that. They told a story. I would bet money they actually sat down and said, what story are we going to write the rest of this season? And so how do you build that heroic story? Not about what you're going to do, but how you're going to be and how you're going to overcome that in your relationships. And then how do you design small steps? A little bit of design thinking. What are little steps, experiments that you can do to learn more about the team, learn more about your work, learn more about the uncertain space that you're working through? And if you're still here, I might as well throw in the 7 safety structures that I use, because people have to feel safe to do all this. And so I asked the leader to model vulnerability. We use small groups or pairs, so you don't have to speak to the whole group. A lot of times I will make sure we have a structured dialogue so that people can express how they understand somebody. I think you're saying this, am I right? Sort of perception checking and mirroring, but much deeper, much more empathy-driven structured dialogue. We do a fair amount of journaling, so that you're on your own, you're writing, and then you can share highlights of your writing, because that just brings out a different level of depth from people. I help find allies for all different kinds of thoughts and opinions so that folks don't feel alone. I like to map polarities, opposites. What are opposites that are both true? There's something happens when folks can speak something that's opposite of something clearly the other person believes and is clearly correct. Wait a minute, then how can I be correct? Well, you are. Opposites are often true. Map them out. Folks feel really safe to share about anything once they can see that the whole range of ideas are really at play and valid, even though they seem to contradict. And finally, I like to create sort of minority reports, sort of more of a studious sort of term, but it just, how do folks in the minority opinion of a decision-making process, how do they feel heard going forward so that their needs and challenges and concerns about whatever the decision is can get addressed as that decision is implemented, that decision that they don't agree with is implemented. Let's just make sure we keep listening to the folks that were unsure about this in the first place, or not in the first place when the decision was made. So that's why I do what I do. That's what I do. And Notre Dame does it, and I've been living it with other people. So come on, let's do that together. Thanks, everybody.